Right now, as you listen to this, millions of people around the world are setting goals they will never achieve. They're writing down their dreams, making vision boards, and telling themselves that this time will be different. But here's the brutal truth. 92% of them will fail. Not because they don't want it badly enough, not because they're lazy, but because they're using a fundamentally flawed approach that's been marketed to them as the secret to success. What if I told you that goals are actually the reason you're not succeeding? That the very thing you've been taught to rely on is sabotaging your progress and keeping you stuck in an endless cycle of motivation and disappointment? The most successful people in the world, the ones who seem to effortlessly achieve everything they want, they don't set goals. They build systems. This isn't just motivation. This is neuroscience. This is psychology. This is the difference between people who dream and people who dominate. By the end of this, you'll never think about achievement the same way again. You'll have the exact blueprint that separates the top 1% from everyone else who's still struggling with willpower and wondering why they can't stick to anything. Chapter 1. Why goals are actually sabotaging your success. Let me start with a story that will shatter everything you believe about goal setting. In 1979, Harvard Business School conducted a study on their MBA graduates. They asked a simple question: do you have clear written goals for your future? Only 3% had written goals, 13% had unwritten goals, and 84% had no goals at all. 10 years later, they followed up. The 13% with unwritten goals were earning twice as much as the 84% with no goals. But here's the kicker. The 3% with written goals were earning 10 times more than the other 97% combined. This study has been cited thousands of times as proof that goal setting works. There's just one problem. The study never happened. It's been completely debunked. But the fact that so many people believed it, shared it, and built their entire approach to success around it reveals something profound about our obsession with goals. We want to believe that success is as simple as writing down what we want and working toward it. But the reality is far more complex and far more problematic. Goals are not just ineffective, they're actively harmful to your long-term success. Here's why. First, goals create a success or failure mentality that destroys your motivation the moment you face a setback. When you set a goal to lose 20 pounds and you gain 2 pounds 1 week, your brain interprets this as failure. This triggers a psychological phenomenon called the what the hell effect, where a small setback leads to complete abandonment of the effort. Second, goals trick you into thinking that reaching the destination is more important than the journey. This creates what psychologists call arrival fallacy, the belief that reaching a specific outcome will fundamentally change how you feel about your life. But study after study shows that achieving goals provides only temporary satisfaction before you return to your baseline happiness level. This is why lottery winners are not significantly happier than non-winners after the initial excitement wears off. Third, goals ignore the role of identity and systems in creating lasting change. When you set a goal to read 50 books this year, you're focused on the outcome. But reading 50 books doesn't make you a reader. Becoming someone who reads every day makes you a reader. The goal is external, but the change has to be internal. Goals focus on what you want to achieve. but they don't address who you need to become. Fourth, goals create artificial urgency and pressure that actually impairs performance. When you're constantly measuring yourself against a specific target and deadline, you activate your stress response systems. This floods your brain with cortisol, which impairs creative thinking, reduces cognitive flexibility, and makes you more likely to quit when things get difficult. The very pressure you think is motivating you is actually making you perform worse. Fifth, goals are binary. You either achieve them or you don't. This creates a mindset where anything short of perfect success feels like failure. But progress is never linear. Success is not about hitting specific targets. It's about consistent improvement over time. When you're obsessed with goals, you miss all the progress you're actually making because it doesn't fit your predetermined definition of success. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, goals give you the illusion of progress without actually requiring progress. The simple act of setting a goal releases dopamine in your brain, giving you the same neurochemical reward as actually making progress. This is why people who talk about their goals are less likely to achieve them. They've already received the psychological payoff. The most successful people understand something that the goal-setting industry doesn't want you to know. Outcomes are not under your control. You cannot control whether you lose exactly 20 pounds, whether you make exactly $100,000, or whether you get exactly the job you want. But you can control your actions, your habits, and your systems. And when you focus on what you can control, the outcomes take care of themselves. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Why Your Brain Rejects Goals. Your brain is not designed for goals. It's designed for survival. And from a survival perspective, goals are actually dangerous. Here's why understanding this changes everything about how you approach success. When you set a goal, you're essentially telling your brain that you're not satisfied with your current situation. Your brain interprets this as a threat to your survival because dissatisfaction with your current state suggests that something is wrong. This triggers your brain's threat detection system, flooding your nervous system with stress hormones. Your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for fear responses, becomes hyperactive. This is why goal setting often feels overwhelming and why so many people experience anxiety when they think about their big goals. You're not broken. Your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do when it perceives danger. But it gets worse. Your brain has a built-in mechanism designed to maintain the status quo called homeostasis. Just like your body maintains a constant temperature, your brain works to maintain consistent patterns of behavior, thought, and emotion. When you try to change dramatically through goal setting, your brain fights back. It creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort you feel when your actions don't align with your current identity. This is why people who set aggressive goals often experience what researchers call the intention-action gap. They genuinely intend to change, but their actions consistently contradict their intentions. It's not about willpower or motivation. It's about brain chemistry. Your neural pathways are literally wired for your current patterns of behavior. Every time you've procrastinated, made excuses, or given up, you've strengthened those neural connections. The goal-setting approach tries to overcome this with willpower and motivation. But these are finite resources. Studies show that willpower depletes throughout the day like a muscle getting tired. This is why you can start the day with perfect motivation to stick to your diet. But by evening, you're ordering pizza. You haven't failed. You've just exhausted your willpower reserves. Here's what most people don't understand about motivation. It's not a cause. It's an effect. You don't get motivated and then take action. You take action and then feel motivated. But goals put the cart before the horse. They require you to feel motivated before you've built any momentum. This is why January gym memberships are abandoned by February. People are trying to sustain motivation without any systems to create it. Your brain also has a negativity bias. It's designed to pay more attention to threats than opportunities. When you set a big goal, your brain doesn't focus on the potential benefits. It focuses on everything that could go wrong. This is why goal setting often increases anxiety rather than excitement. Your brain is running worst-case scenarios on repeat. But there's something even more insidious happening. Goals activate what psychologists call the focusing illusion, the tendency to overestimate the impact of any single factor on your overall well-being. When you set a goal to make a certain amount of money, your brain convinces you that achieving this goal will solve all your problems and make you permanently happy. But research consistently shows that specific achievements have much less impact on long-term satisfaction than we predict. This creates a cycle where achieving goals leads to disappointment rather than fulfillment. You work hard to hit your target. You achieve it. You feel good for a brief moment. And then you realize that nothing fundamental has changed about your life. So you set bigger goals, thinking that the next achievement will be the one that finally makes you happy. But you're chasing a neurochemical impossibility. Your brain is also terrible at predicting future motivation and circumstances. When you set a goal in a moment of high motivation, you're essentially making commitments for your future self based on how you feel right now. But your future self will face different circumstances, different energy levels, different stresses, and different priorities. This is why goals feel exciting when you set them but become burdens over time. The research on goal setting reveals another troubling pattern. It actually reduces intrinsic motivation. When you attach external outcomes to activities you naturally enjoy, you transform pleasure into pressure. Studies show that when people are given external goals for activities they already find rewarding, they enjoy those activities less and are more likely to quit when the external motivation is removed. Understanding the psychology behind why your brain rejects goals isn't about giving up on improvement. It's about working with your brain instead of against it. The most successful people have learned to bypass these psychological traps by focusing on systems instead of outcomes. They understand that lasting change happens at the identity level, not the behavior level. Chapter 3. The Neuroscience of Systems versus Goals. The difference between systems and goals isn't just philosophical. It's neurological. When you understand what's happening in your brain when you focus on systems versus goals, you'll never question why this approach is so much more effective. The science is overwhelming, and it explains why some people seem to effortlessly maintain positive habits while others struggle with willpower and motivation. Let's start with neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections. Every time you repeat a behavior, you strengthen the neural pathway associated with that behavior. This is why habits become automatic. The neural pathway become so strong that the behavior requires virtually no conscious effort. But here's the crucial difference. Goals focus on the destination, which doesn't build neural pathways. Systems focus on repetition, which literally rewires your brain. When you set a goal to run a marathon, you're not building any neural pathways related to running. You're building neural pathways related to outcome, attachment, and result measurement. But when you commit to a system of running every morning, you're building neural pathways related to the identity of being a runner. Every single day, you're reinforcing the neural networks that make running feel natural and automatic. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and decision-making, has limited capacity. This is why willpower feels finite. Because it is. When you rely on goals, you're constantly taxing this part of your brain by requiring conscious decisions about whether to take action. Should I go to the gym today? Should I skip this meal? Should I work on my project? Each decision depletes your mental resources. But systems bypass this limitation by leveraging the basal ganglia, the part of your brain responsible for automatic behaviors and habits. When you build systems, behaviors become unconscious. You don't have to decide whether to brush your teeth. You just do it automatically. The same thing happens with any behavior you systematize. The basal ganglia takes over, freeing your prefrontal cortex for more important decisions. Dopamine, your brain's reward chemical, responds differently to systems versus goals. Goals create what neuroscientists call reward prediction error. Your brain releases dopamine when you anticipate achieving the goal, but then experiences a dopamine crash when you actually achieve it or when progress stalls. This is why achieving goals often feels anticlimactic and why people experience the post-achievement blues. Systems create a different dopamine pattern. Instead of one large spike followed by a crash, systems create consistent small releases of dopamine each time you complete your systematic behaviors. This creates sustainable motivation because you're getting regular neurochemical rewards for the process, not just the outcome. Your brain starts to crave the system itself, not just what the system might produce. The anterior cingulate cortex, responsible for conflict monitoring, becomes hyperactive when there's misalignment between your actions and identity. When you set a goal to become wealthy but your daily actions reflect someone who's financially irresponsible, this creates cognitive dissonance that your brain experiences as psychological pain. This is why goal setting often feels stressful and why people abandon their goals. They're fighting against their own identity. Systems work by gradually shifting identity at the neural level. Instead of trying to force behavior change through willpower, systems create evidence that you are becoming the type of person who naturally engages in those behaviors. Each time you complete your systematic action, you're literally proving to your brain that you are someone who does this thing. The anterior cingulate cortex relaxes because there's no longer conflict between your identity and your actions. Mirror neurons, the brain cells responsible for observational learning and imitation, respond more strongly to consistent patterns than to sporadic, intense efforts. When you build systems, you're essentially training your mirror neurons to recognize and reinforce patterns of excellence. Your brain starts to see systematic behavior as normal and natural, making it easier to maintain long-term. The hippocampus, responsible for memory formation, consolidates experiences differently based on whether they're goal-oriented or system-oriented. Goal-oriented experiences are stored as discrete events. I achieved this outcome on this date. System-oriented experiences are stored as patterns and identities. I am the type of person who does this consistently. This difference in memory encoding affects how you see yourself and how you approach future challenges. Stress hormones like cortisol have completely different effects on systems versus goals. Goals activate your sympathetic nervous system because they create pressure and urgency. Elevated cortisol impairs memory formation, reduces creativity, and makes you more likely to revert to old patterns under pressure. Systems activate your parasympathetic nervous system because they feel safe and predictable. This creates the optimal brain state for learning, growth, and sustainable behavior change. The reticular activating system, your brain's filtering mechanism, focuses on whatever you pay attention to consistently. When you focus on goals, your RAS filters for outcome-related information, making you hypersensitive to whether you're succeeding or failing. This creates emotional volatility and inconsistent motivation. When you focus on systems, your RAS filters for opportunities to execute your systems, making you more likely to notice and take advantage of small opportunities for progress. Understanding this, neuroscience isn't academic, it's practical. When you align your approach to change with how your brain actually works, everything becomes easier. You're no longer fighting against your own neurology. You're leveraging it. Chapter 4. The 4 Pillars of Unstoppable Systems. Every system that creates lasting transformation is built on 4 fundamental pillars. Master these pillars, and you can systematize any outcome you want in life. Miss any one of them, and your system will collapse under pressure. These aren't theories. These are the principles that separate people who talk about change from people who actually transform their lives. The first pillar is identity alignment. Most people try to change their behavior without changing their identity. But this is backwards. Behavior change that conflicts with identity is temporary at best. If you see yourself as someone who's bad with money, you might stick to a budget for a few weeks, but eventually you'll revert to financial behaviors that align with your identity. The system approach works by gradually shifting identity through consistent evidence. Here's how identity alignment works in practice. Instead of setting a goal to save $10,000, you build a system around becoming the type of person who values financial security. Every time you choose to save money instead of spending it, you're not just moving toward a financial target, you're proving to yourself that you are someone who makes smart financial decisions. The behavior reinforces the identity, and the identity makes the behavior feel natural. Identity alignment requires what I call micro-identities, small, specific ways of seeing yourself that support your larger transformation. Instead of trying to become a completely different person overnight, you adopt specific identity statements that feel slightly challenging but believable. I am someone who moves my body every day. I am someone who invests in my education. I am someone who keeps commitments to myself. Each systematic action becomes evidence for these micro-identities. The second pillar is environmental design. Your environment is more powerful than your willpower. If you have to rely on self-control to execute your system is poorly designed. The most effective systems make good behavior automatic and bad behavior difficult. This isn't about perfection. It's about tilting the odds in your favor so that following your system becomes the path of least resistance. Environmental design has three components: removal, addition, and restructuring. Removal means eliminating cues that trigger unwanted behaviors. If you want to eat healthier, you remove junk food from your house. If you want to be more productive, you remove social media apps from your phone. Addition means introducing cues that trigger desired behaviors. If you want to read more, you place books in every room. If you want to exercise, you lay out your workout clothes the night before. Restructuring means changing the context in which behaviors occur. If you want to write every morning, you restructure your morning routine to include a specific time and place for writing. If you want to improve your relationships, you restructure your schedule to include regular one-on-one time with important people. The key is making your desired behaviors inevitable by designing an environment that supports them. The third pillar is systematic progression. Most people either try to change everything at once, or they make changes so small that they don't create momentum. Systematic progression means starting with behaviors that are challenging enough to create confidence, but easy enough to maintain consistency. You build momentum through success, not through suffering. The progression should follow what I call the competence curve. You start with actions that are 90% likely to succeed consistently. This builds confidence and establishes the neural pathways associated with your system. Once these behaviors become automatic, you increase the challenge level to behaviors that are 80% likely to succeed consistently. You continue this progression until you're operating at a level that seemed impossible when you started. Systematic progression also means designing feedback loops that provide regular information about your progress. But instead of measuring outcomes, you measure process compliance. How consistently are you executing your systematic behaviors? This keeps you focused on what you can control and provides positive reinforcement for the actions that create long-term results. The fourth pillar is resilience protocols. Every system will face disruption, travel, illness, work stress, family emergencies. The difference between systems that survive and systems that collapse is not the absence of disruption, but the presence of protocols for handling disruption. Resilience protocols are predetermined responses to the situations that typically derail progress. Minimum viable systems are the foundation of resilience protocols. These are simplified versions of your regular systems that you can execute even when circumstances are challenging. If your normal exercise system involves an hour at the gym, your minimum viable system might be 10 minutes of bodyweight exercises in your hotel room. The key is maintaining some version of your systematic behavior, even when you can't execute the full version. Recovery protocols are equally important. When you inevitably miss a day or break your system, you need a predetermined plan for getting back on track. Most people treat any deviation from their system as total failure, but resilient systems expect and account for human imperfection. The protocol is simple. When you miss one day, you immediately execute your system the next day. No guilt, no self-punishment, no starting over. Just immediate re-engagement. The combination of these four pillars creates what I call systematic inevitability. A situation where positive outcomes become inevitable because the underlying systems are designed for long-term sustainability. You're no longer hoping and wishing for change. You're systematically engineering it. Chapter 5. How to reverse engineer any outcome into systems. The most successful people in any field have mastered the art of reverse engineering. They start with the outcome they want and work backwards to identify the systems that would inevitably produce that outcome. This isn't goal setting, it's systems thinking. The difference is that instead of focusing on the destination, you're designing the journey that makes the destination inevitable. Here's the systematic process for reverse engineering any outcome into actionable systems. First, you identify the end state identity, not what you want to achieve, but who you need to become to naturally achieve those things. If you want to build a successful business, you don't focus on revenue targets. You focus on becoming the type of person who naturally creates value for others, solves problems systematically, and makes decisions based on long-term thinking. The identity analysis requires brutal honesty about the gap between who you are now and who you need to become. Most people skip this step because it's uncomfortable to acknowledge that achieving your desired outcomes requires fundamental changes in how you think and act. But this discomfort is exactly why the analysis is necessary. You can't systematize changes you're not willing to acknowledge. Once you've identified the target identity, you reverse engineer the daily behaviors that would be natural for someone with that identity. What would someone who effortlessly maintains excellent health do every single day? They would prioritize sleep, move their body regularly, eat foods that fuel their performance, and manage stress proactively. These become the components of your health system. The key is thinking in terms of systems, not habits. A habit is a single behavior, going to the gym 3 times per week. A system is an integrated set of behaviors that reinforce each other. Preparing healthy meals on Sunday, laying out workout clothes each night, tracking energy levels, scheduling recovery time, and surrounding yourself with people who support your health goals. The system approach recognizes that sustainable change happens through reinforcement, not willpower. Next, you identify the leading indicators, the daily and weekly metrics that predict long-term success. These are different from lagging indicators, which measure outcomes after they've already occurred. If you want to build wealth, lagging indicators are your net worth and investment returns. Leading indicators are how much you save each month, how many hours you spend learning about money management, and how many high-value relationships you're building. Leading indicators are powerful because they focus your attention on the inputs you control rather than the outputs you can't directly control. You can't control whether the stock market performs well this year, but you can control whether you invest consistently. You can't control whether your business idea succeeds immediately, but you can control whether you systematically test and improve your offering. The systematic approach also requires identifying and designing around constraint factors, the elements that typically limit progress in your chosen area. Every system has bottlenecks, and ignoring these bottlenecks leads to systematic failure. If you want to build a content creation business, your constraint factor might be idea generation, production capacity, or audience building. Your system must specifically address these constraints. For most transformations, time and energy are the primary constraint factors. This is why effective systems include what I call resource allocation protocols, predetermined decisions about how you'll invest your time and energy to support your systematic behaviors. If health is a priority, you allocate time for meal preparation, exercise, and sleep. If learning is a priority, You allocate time for reading, practicing, and reflection. You also need to design accountability mechanisms that keep you connected to your system even when motivation fluctuates. External accountability works, but internal accountability is more sustainable. This means creating personal metrics that matter to you, regular review processes that help you course correct, and identity statements that connect your daily actions to your long-term vision. The reverse engineering process also includes failure analysis, systematically identifying the situations, emotions, and circumstances that typically derail progress. Instead of hoping these won't occur, you design specific protocols for handling them. If stress eating typically sabotages your nutrition system, you create predetermined responses for high-stress situations. Environmental engineering is crucial in the reverse engineering process. You identify the physical and social environments that would naturally support your target behaviors and systematically create those environments. If you want to read more, you engineer physical environments with books easily accessible and distractions removed. If you want to build deeper relationships, you engineer social environments that prioritize meaningful connection over superficial interaction. Finally, you design progressive complexity into your systems. You don't try to implement the full system immediately. You start with the minimum viable version that establishes the pattern. Then systematically add complexity as the foundational behaviors become automatic. This prevents the overwhelm that kills most change efforts, while ensuring consistent progress toward your desired outcomes. The reverse engineering approach transforms vague desires into concrete action plans. Instead of hoping for change, you're systematically engineering it through daily behaviors that align with your target identity and naturally produce your desired outcomes. Chapter 6. Identity-Based Systems. Becoming the person who already has what you want. The most powerful secret that separates people who permanently transform their lives from those who constantly struggle with willpower is this: they don't try to change their behavior, they change their identity. And once your identity shifts, the behaviors become automatic. This isn't positive thinking or visualization. This is strategic identity engineering. And it's the difference between forcing yourself to do things and becoming someone who naturally does those things. Here's what most people get wrong about identity. They think identity is fixed, that you are who you are, based on your past experiences, your personality, or your genetics. But identity is actually fluid. It's constructed through the stories you tell yourself about who you are. And those stories are based on evidence. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. The problem is that most people are unconsciously voting for identities that don't serve them. When you repeatedly procrastinate, you're voting for the identity of being someone who struggles with follow-through. When you consistently make excuses, you're voting for the identity of being someone who avoids responsibility. When you regularly break commitments to yourself, you're voting for the identity of being someone whose word doesn't matter. These votes add up, and eventually your brain accepts this as your identity. But here's the breakthrough. You can strategically engineer your identity by being intentional about the votes you cast. Every systematic behavior becomes evidence for the identity you want to develop. When you stick to your morning routine, you're voting for the identity of being someone who is disciplined and reliable. When you choose to read instead of scrolling social media, you're voting for the identity of being someone who values growth over entertainment. When you follow through on commitments to yourself, you're voting for the identity of being someone whose word is valuable. The identity-based approach starts with what I call identity design, clearly defining who you need to become to naturally achieve your desired outcomes. This isn't about creating a fake version of yourself. It's about identifying the authentic version of yourself that would effortlessly maintain the behaviors that create success. If you want excellent health, you design the identity of someone who naturally prioritizes their physical well-being. If you want financial freedom, you design the identity of someone who naturally makes smart financial decisions. But identity design must be believable. You can't go from seeing yourself as lazy to suddenly adopting the identity of being the most disciplined person in the world. Your brain will reject this as incongruent with your self-concept. Instead, you develop what I call bridge identities, slightly upgraded versions of yourself that feel challenging but achievable. If you currently see yourself as someone who struggles with consistency, your bridge identity might be someone who is becoming more reliable. If you see yourself as financially irresponsible, your bridge identity might be someone who is learning to make smarter money decisions. The key to successful identity shifting is starting with micro-identities, small, specific aspects of your larger identity that you can prove through daily actions. Instead of trying to become a completely different person, you focus on becoming someone who does one specific thing consistently. I am someone who exercises every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I am someone who reads for 20 minutes before bed. I am someone who saves 10% of every paycheck. These micro-identities feel manageable, but they create the foundation for larger identity shifts. Each time you execute a systematic behavior, you're creating what psychologists call behavioral evidence, proof that supports your desired identity. Your brain is constantly looking for evidence to confirm its beliefs about who you are. When you consistently provide evidence for positive identities, your brain starts to accept these as true. The beautiful thing about behavioral evidence is that it's objective. You can't argue with your own actions. If you've meditated every day for 30 days, you have undeniable proof that you are someone who meditates daily. Identity-based systems also leverage what I call identity anchors, specific phrases or statements that reinforce your desired identity during moments of decision. Instead of asking yourself whether you feel like doing something, you ask yourself what someone with your target identity would do. What would someone who values their health do in this situation? What would someone who is financially responsible do right now? What would someone who is committed to their growth choose? These questions bypass motivation and emotion, connecting your decisions directly to your identity. The compound effect of identity-based thinking is extraordinary. When your behavior aligns with your identity, decision-making becomes effortless. You don't have to motivate yourself to exercise because you are someone who exercises. You don't have to force yourself to save money because you are someone who values financial security. You don't have to struggle with learning because you are someone who is committed to growth. The behavior flows naturally from the identity, but identity shifts require what I call identity maintenance. Regularly reinforcing your new identity through both actions and internal dialogue. This means celebrating evidence that supports your desired identity and reframing setbacks as temporary deviations rather than identity failures. If you miss a workout, you don't conclude that you're lazy. You remind yourself that you are someone who exercises regularly. And this was just one missed session. The identity remains intact, making it easier to get back on track. Identity-based systems also create what psychologists call identity protection motivation. Once you've established a positive identity, your brain becomes motivated to protect that identity. You start making decisions not just based on immediate outcomes, but based on whether those decisions align with who you believe you are. This creates a powerful internal accountability system that doesn't rely on external motivation or willpower. The most successful people understand that sustainable change happens at the identity level, not the behavior level. They don't try to force themselves to do things that conflict with their self-concept. They strategically shift their self-concept so that successful behaviors become natural expressions of who they are. This is why their success seems effortless. They're not fighting against their identity. They're leveraging it. Chapter 7. Environmental Design. Engineering your space for automatic success. Your environment is silently shaping every decision you make. Right now, as you listen to this, your physical space is either supporting your success or sabotaging it. The most successful people understand something that average people ignore. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your environment. If you want to transform your life without relying on willpower, you must master the art of environmental design. Here's the truth, that the self-help industry doesn't want you to know. Willpower is not a renewable resource. Research consistently shows that decision fatigue depletes your mental energy throughout the day. Every time you have to choose between a good option and a bad option, you're using up cognitive resources that could be applied to more important decisions. But environmental design eliminates the need for these choices by making good decisions inevitable and bad decisions difficult or impossible. Environmental design operates on 3 levels: physical environment, digital environment, and social environment. Each level has enormous influence over your behavior, and most people are completely unconscious of how their environment is programming their actions. When you become intentional about designing all 3 levels, you create what I call environmental inevitability, a situation where following your systems becomes the path of least resistance. Let's start with physical environment. Every object in your space is either a cue for positive behavior or negative behavior. If you want to read more but your book is in another room while your phone is next to your bed, you've designed your environment to prioritize phone usage over reading. If you want to exercise but your workout clothes are buried in a drawer while your comfortable clothes are easily accessible, you've designed your environment to prioritize comfort over fitness. The principle of environmental design is simple. Reduce friction for behaviors you want, and increase friction for behaviors you don't want. Friction is the effort required to perform an action. When you reduce friction for positive behaviors, they become more likely to happen automatically. When you increase friction for negative behaviors, they require conscious effort, making them less likely to occur. Reducing friction means making positive behaviors as easy as possible. If you want to drink more water, place water bottles in every room. If you want to take vitamins, put them next to your coffee maker. If you want to practice guitar, leave your guitar in a visible, accessible location. If you want to eat healthier, prepare healthy snacks and place them at eye level in your refrigerator. The key is eliminating any barriers between intention and action. Increasing friction means making negative behaviors more difficult. If you want to reduce social media usage, delete apps from your phone and log out of accounts on your computer. If you want to eat less junk food, don't buy it or store it in hard-to-reach places. If you want to reduce television watching, unplug the TV and put the remote in another room. If you want to stop hitting snooze, place your alarm across the room. The goal is not to make these behaviors impossible, but to require conscious effort. Digital environment design is increasingly critical in our technology-saturated world. Your devices are programmed by some of the smartest minds in the world to capture and hold your attention. If you're not intentional about your digital environment, these platforms will hijack your focus and direct it toward their priorities rather than yours. But when you design your digital environment strategically, technology becomes a tool for achieving your systems rather than a distraction from them. Digital environment design starts with audit and elimination. Go through every app on your phone and ask yourself, does this support my systems or distract from them? Delete or remove access to apps that consistently pull you away from your priorities. Use website blockers, app timers, and digital well-being tools to create friction around time-wasting activities. Set up your devices so that the first thing you see when you open them supports your goals rather than distracts from them. But digital environment design isn't just about restriction, it's also about optimization. Use technology to automate positive behaviors and create reminders for systematic actions. Set up automatic transfers to savings accounts. Use habit tracking apps to monitor your system compliance. Create calendar blocks for important activities. Set up email filters that prioritize important messages and reduce noise. Configure your devices to deliver information and opportunities that support your systems. Social environment is perhaps the most powerful and most overlooked aspect of environmental design. Jim Rohn famously said that you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But the influence of social environment goes far beyond just your closest relationships. Every person you interact with regularly is either reinforcing positive behaviors or normalizing negative ones. Social environment design requires both addition and subtraction. You need to distance yourself from people who consistently engage in behaviors that conflict with your systems, and you need to seek out people who naturally engage in the behaviors you want to develop. This doesn't mean cutting off relationships, but it does mean being intentional about who you spend time with and in what contexts. If you want to build a business, spend time with entrepreneurs. If you want to get in shape, exercise with people who prioritize fitness. If you want to read more, join book clubs or discussion groups. If you want to learn new skills, connect with people who value growth and learning. When positive behaviors are normal in your social environment, they become easier to maintain because they feel natural rather than exceptional. Social environment design also means being strategic about the content you consume. The podcasts you listen to, the books you read, the videos you watch. All of these are part of your social environment because they expose you to different perspectives, values, and behaviors. Consuming content from people who embody the identity you want to develop helps normalize that identity in your mind. Environmental design also includes what I call contextual cues, specific triggers in your environment that automatically prompt systematic behaviors. These could be visual cues like putting your workout clothes where you'll see them first thing in the morning, or temporal cues like always reading after you brush your teeth at night. The key is creating strong associations between environmental triggers and desired behaviors. The compound effect of environmental design is extraordinary. When your environment consistently supports your systems, following those systems becomes automatic. You're no longer relying on motivation or willpower to make good choices. You're leveraging the power of environmental psychology to make good choices inevitable. This is why people who master environmental design seem to achieve their goals effortlessly. They're not using more willpower, they're using more intelligence. Chapter 8. Implementation Strategy. The 30-day System Installation Protocol. Most people fail at implementing systems because they try to change everything at once. They get excited about transformation and immediately attempt to overhaul their entire life, only to crash and burn within a few weeks. But the most successful people understand that sustainable change happens through systematic implementation, not dramatic overhaul. This is your step-by-step protocol for installing any system in exactly 30 days, creating lasting change without overwhelm or burnout. The 30-day time frame is not arbitrary. Neuroscience research shows that it takes approximately 21 to 30 days of consistent repetition to begin forming automatic neural pathways. But more importantly, 30 days is long enough to create real momentum without feeling so long that you lose focus or motivation. It's the perfect balance between challenging yourself and setting yourself up for success. Week 1 is Foundation Week, and your only goal is establishing the minimum viable version of your system. This is not the time to be ambitious or try to implement the full version of what you eventually want to achieve. Instead, you focus on the smallest possible version that still moves you in the right direction. If your ultimate system involves exercising for an hour every day, your minimum viable version might be 10 minutes of walking. If you want to eventually read for 2 hours daily, start with 10 pages. The reason for starting small is psychological, not practical. Your brain judges new behaviors based on how they feel, not how they look. A 10-minute walk that feels easy and achievable creates positive associations with exercise. An hour-long workout that feels overwhelming creates negative associations that make you less likely to continue. During Foundation Week, you're not trying to get dramatic results. You're trying to prove to your brain that this new behavior is safe, manageable, and positive. Foundation Week also involves what I call implementation triggers, specific cues that will prompt your systematic behavior. The most effective triggers are actions you already do consistently. If you want to implement a reading system, you might trigger it immediately after your morning coffee. If you want to implement an exercise system, you might trigger it immediately after you wake up. The key is choosing triggers that are already automatic, so you don't have to remember to remember. Week 2 is Consistency Week, where your focus shifts from establishing the behavior to proving you can maintain it. This is often where people encounter the first major challenge. The novelty has worn off, but the behavior hasn't become automatic yet. During Consistency Week, your only goal is executing your minimum viable system every single day, regardless of how you feel or what else is happening in your life. Consistency Week often involves what I call the implementation dip, a period where motivation decreases and the new behavior feels more difficult. This is completely normal and expected. Your brain is testing whether this new pattern is going to become permanent or whether it's just a temporary change. The key is understanding that feeling less motivated during week 2 doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're right on track. To navigate consistency week successfully, you need predetermined responses to the obstacles that typically derail progress. What will you do if you're traveling? What will you do if you're sick? What will you do if you're stressed or busy? Having specific protocols for these situations prevents you from using them as excuses to break your system. Remember, the goal during consistency week is not perfection. It's proof that you can maintain this behavior under various circumstances. Week 3 is integration week, where you begin incorporating your systematic behavior into your broader life context. This is when you start connecting your new system to your identity and long-term vision. Instead of just going through the motions, you begin to see yourself as someone who naturally engages in this behavior. You start identifying with the identity that the system supports. Integration week is also when you can begin to slightly increase the complexity or duration of your system, but only if the minimum viable version has become truly automatic. The test is simple. Does executing your system require conscious effort and decision-making, or has it become as automatic as brushing your teeth? If it still requires effort, continue with the minimum viable version. If it feels automatic, you can carefully expand it. Week 4 is optimization week, where you refine and improve your system based on what you've learned from the first 3 weeks. What aspects of the system work well? What aspects create friction or resistance? How can you modify the system to be more effective, enjoyable, or sustainable? Optimization week is about making good systems great, not about making dramatic changes. During optimization week, you also begin planning for long-term sustainability. How will you maintain this system when life gets busy? How will you continue progressing without losing the foundation you've built? What support structures, accountability measures, or environmental modifications will help ensure this system becomes a permanent part of your life? The key to successful implementation is what I call progressive consistency, focusing on maintaining the behavior rather than perfecting it. Many people derail their progress by trying to optimize a system before it's even established. They change variables, increase intensity, or add complexity before the foundational behavior has become automatic. This creates confusion and inconsistency that undermines the neural pathway formation that makes systems sustainable. Throughout all 4 weeks, you must resist the temptation to implement multiple systems simultaneously. Your brain can only handle one major behavioral change at a time if you want that change to become automatic. Trying to implement multiple systems simultaneously divides your mental resources and makes it unlikely that any of them will stick. The most successful people implement systems sequentially, not simultaneously. You also need to track process compliance, not outcomes. During the 30-day implementation period, your only metric should be whether you executed your systematic behavior, not what results that behavior produced. Did you complete your 10-minute walk? Did you read your 10 pages? Did you meditate for 5 minutes? These process metrics keep you focused on what you can control and provide immediate feedback about your progress. The 30-day implementation protocol also includes what I call failure protocols, predetermined responses to missing a day or breaking your system. The most important rule is the 1-day rule. If you miss 1 day, You must execute your system the next day without exception. Missing one day is human. Missing 2 days in a row is the beginning of system collapse. The one-day rule prevents temporary setbacks from becoming permanent failures. By the end of 30 days, you'll have successfully installed a new system that feels natural, automatic, and sustainable. More importantly, you'll have proven to yourself that you can systematically implement positive changes in your life. This builds what I call implementation confidence, the belief that you can successfully adopt any behavior that serves your long-term goals. Once you have implementation confidence, there's no limit to how much you can improve your life through systematic change. Chapter 9. Advanced System Optimization. Stacking, scaling, and compound effects. Once you've successfully installed your first system using the 30-day protocol, you're ready for advanced optimization strategies that will multiply your results and create exponential progress. This is where most people plateau. They get comfortable with basic systems, but never learn to optimize them for maximum impact. The difference between people who achieve moderate improvement and those who achieve extraordinary transformation lies in understanding advanced system mechanics. The first advanced strategy is system stacking, the art of linking multiple systems together so they reinforce each other and create compound benefits. Instead of having isolated habits that exist independently, you design integrated systems where completing one behavior automatically triggers the next. This creates what I call systematic momentum, where each positive action makes the next positive action more likely to occur. System stacking works by leveraging habit chaining, the psychological principle that behaviors linked to existing automatic behaviors are more likely to become automatic themselves. But effective system stacking goes beyond simple habit chaining. You're strategically designing sequences of behaviors that support the same identity or outcome, creating multiple touchpoints throughout your day that reinforce your target transformation. Here's how system stacking works in practice. Instead of having separate systems for exercise, nutrition, and stress management, you create an integrated wellness stack. You wake up and immediately drink a large glass of water, which triggers 5 minutes of stretching, which triggers 10 minutes of meditation, which triggers preparation of a healthy breakfast. Each behavior naturally leads to the next, and together they create a powerful start to your day that supports your identity as someone who prioritizes health. The key to effective system stacking is understanding what I call behavioral compatibility. Not all behaviors stack well together. You want to link behaviors that share similar contexts, energy levels, and mental states. High-energy behaviors stack well with other high-energy behaviors. Reflective behaviors stack well with other reflective behaviors. Trying to stack incompatible behaviors creates friction and makes the entire stack less likely to succeed. System stacking also leverages what psychologists call implementation intention, the practice of creating if-then plans that automatically trigger desired behaviors. But instead of simple if-then statements, you create if-then-then-then chains that link multiple behaviors together. If I finish my morning coffee, then I read for 10 minutes, then I write in my journal for 5 minutes, then I review my priorities for the day. Each behavior triggers the next, creating systematic momentum. The second advanced strategy is system scaling, gradually increasing the complexity, intensity, or scope of your systems as they become more automatic. Most people either stay at the beginner level forever or try to scale too quickly and overwhelm themselves. Effective scaling requires understanding the difference between linear scaling and exponential scaling, and knowing when to apply each approach. Linear scaling means gradually increasing the volume or duration of your systematic behaviors. If you start with 10 minutes of reading, you might increase to 15 minutes after a month, then 20 minutes after another month. This approach works well for behaviors where more is generally better and where you have limited time constraints. Exponential scaling means adding new dimensions or components to your systems rather than just increasing volume. Instead of just reading more, you might add note-taking, discussion with others, and practical application of what you learn. This approach creates exponential returns because you're not just doing more of the same thing, you're doing fundamentally more effective things. The key to successful scaling is what I call the automation test. Before you scale any system, ask yourself whether the current version feels truly automatic. Can you execute it consistently without conscious effort or decision-making? If not, focus on automation before scaling. Many people destroy good systems by scaling prematurely, before the foundational behaviors have become genuinely automatic. Scaling also requires understanding capacity management and the recognition that your mental, physical, and emotional resources are finite. Adding complexity to one system may require reducing complexity in another. The most successful people are constantly optimizing their entire portfolio of systems, not just individual behaviors. The third advanced strategy is compound effect engineering, designing systems that create exponential returns over time rather than just linear returns. Most people focus on systems that provide immediate, obvious benefits. But the most powerful systems are those that create benefits that compound, where the returns from your systematic behaviors increase over time rather than staying constant. Compound effect systems typically involve learning, relationship building, skill development, or asset creation. A reading system compounds because each book builds on the knowledge from previous books. A networking system compounds because each relationship can lead to multiple new relationships. A fitness system compounds because strength and endurance improvements make future workouts more effective. To engineer compound effects, you must think in terms of leverage and multiplication rather than addition. Instead of asking how you can do more, ask how you can create systems that become more effective over time. This often involves focusing on systems that build assets, knowledge, skills, relationships, reputation, or financial assets, rather than systems that just maintain current states. Compound effect engineering also requires long-term thinking and delayed gratification. The most powerful compound effects are often invisible in the short term but become exponentially obvious over longer time periods. This is why most people don't stick with compound systems. They don't see immediate results and assume the system isn't working. Advanced system optimization also includes what I call system synergy, designing systems that create beneficial interactions with each other. Instead of just stacking systems sequentially, you design systems that enhance each other's effectiveness. A learning system enhances a career system by making you more valuable. A fitness system enhances a productivity system by increasing your energy. A relationship system enhances all other systems by providing support and accountability. The fourth advanced strategy is adaptive optimization, continuously refining your systems based on feedback and changing circumstances. Static systems become less effective over time as your life situation, energy levels, and priorities evolve. Adaptive optimization means regularly reviewing and updating your systems to maintain maximum effectiveness. Adaptive optimization involves three types of adjustments: efficiency improvements, effectiveness improvements, and environmental adaptations. Efficiency improvements make existing systems faster or easier to execute. Effectiveness improvements make systems produce better results. Environmental adaptations modify systems to work better in changing circumstances. The key to effective adaptive optimization is systematic experimentation, deliberately trying variations of your systems and measuring the results. This might involve B. Testing different approaches, tracking leading indicators of system effectiveness, or regularly reviewing what's working and what isn't. The goal is continuous improvement without losing the foundation that makes your system sustainable. Advanced system optimization also requires understanding the plateau principle, the recognition that all systems eventually reach a point of diminishing returns. When a system reaches this point, the solution isn't to work harder or add more complexity. The solution is often to shift to a completely different type of system that addresses new leverage points or creates new types of value. Mastering advanced system optimization transforms you from someone who has good habits into someone who has extraordinary life systems. You become someone who doesn't just maintain positive behaviors, but who continuously evolves those behaviors to create increasing value and impact over time. This is the difference between good self-improvement and true life transformation. Chapter 10. The Compound Effect. How systems create exponential life changes. The most profound difference between people who achieve extraordinary success and those who remain average isn't talent, luck, or circumstances. It's their understanding of compound effects. While average people focus on linear improvements and immediate results, extraordinary people design systems that create exponential growth over time. This final chapter reveals how to harness the compound effect through systematic thinking, turning small daily actions into life-changing transformations. Compound effects work because of a fundamental principle that most people don't understand. Small improvements, multiplied by consistency, create exponential results. A 1% improvement every day doesn't just add up to 365% improvement over a year. Due to compounding, it actually results in a 678% improvement. This isn't just mathematical theory. It's the secret behind every extraordinary achievement in human history. But here's what most people miss about compound effects. They're not automatic. They require systematic design. Random positive actions don't compound. Only systematic positive actions that build on each other create compound effects. This is why people who focus on goals often see linear progress at best, while people who focus on systems experience exponential transformation. The first principle of compound system design is understanding the difference between compound inputs and compound outputs. Compound inputs are systematic behaviors that become more effective over time. Reading, exercising, skill development, relationship building, and investing are examples of compound inputs. Each day's effort builds on previous days, making future efforts more effective. Compound outputs are results that increase exponentially rather than linearly. Wealth, influence, capability, and opportunities. Most people focus entirely on compound outputs. They want exponential results. But compound outputs are only possible through compound inputs. You can't create exponential wealth without systematic investing. You can't create extraordinary influence without systematic relationship building. You can't create exceptional capabilities without systematic skill development. The compound effect starts with designing systems around compound inputs, not chasing compound outputs. The second principle is understanding compound timeframes. The recognition that different types of compound effects operate on different timescales. Physical fitness compounds over months. Knowledge compounds over years. Relationships compound over decades. Financial investments compound over multiple decades. Understanding these timeframes prevents you from abandoning compound systems prematurely when you don't see immediate exponential results. This is why patience is not just a virtue in compound thinking. It's a strategic requirement. The most powerful compound effects are often invisible during the initial stages. You can read every day for months without feeling dramatically smarter. You can invest consistently for years without feeling wealthy. You can build relationships systematically without immediately having a powerful network. But people who understand compound effects know that this invisible progress is creating the foundation for exponential future returns. The third principle is compound acceleration. The recognition that compound effects don't just continue linearly, they accelerate over time. This happens because systematic behaviors create what I call compound amplifiers, capabilities, resources, or conditions that make future systematic behaviors more effective. Learning accelerates your ability to learn faster. Physical fitness accelerates your ability to become more fit. Wealth accelerates your ability to create more wealth. Network effects accelerate your ability to build bigger networks. Compound acceleration is why successful people often seem to achieve more and more with less and less effort over time. They're not working harder. They're leveraging the compound amplifiers they've built through years of systematic behavior. This is why focusing on long-term systems instead of short-term goals is so crucial. Every systematic behavior is either building compound amplifiers or neglecting them. The fourth principle is compound integration. Designing systems that create compound effects across multiple areas of your life simultaneously. Instead of having isolated systems that only affect single areas, you create integrated systems that improve multiple aspects of your life at once. A morning routine that includes exercise, reading, and planning compounds your physical health, knowledge, and productivity simultaneously. Compound integration works because many systematic behaviors have multiple benefits that reinforce each other. Regular exercise doesn't just improve your physical health. It also increases your mental clarity, energy levels, and discipline. Reading doesn't just increase your knowledge. It also improves your communication skills, critical thinking, and cultural awareness. Meditation doesn't just reduce stress. It also increases focus, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. The most successful people deliberately design systems that maximize compound integration. They look for systematic behaviors that create benefits across multiple areas of life, understanding that this approach creates exponential returns compared to isolated improvements. This is why morning routines, evening routines, and other systematic approaches to time management are so powerful. They create compound effects across multiple life domains simultaneously. The fifth principle is compound protection. Designing systems that protect compound effects from disruption and decay. Compound effects are powerful but fragile. Missing a few days can set back weeks of progress. Abandoning a system for a month can eliminate months of compound benefits. But people who understand compound effects don't just build them, they systematically protect them. Compound protection involves creating redundancy and resilience in your systems so they can survive disruption without losing momentum. This includes minimum viable versions of your systems for challenging circumstances, recovery protocols for getting back on track after disruptions, and environmental design that makes systematic behaviors as automatic as possible. Compound protection also means understanding that consistency matters more than intensity for compound effects. 1 hour of reading every day for a year creates more compound benefits than reading for 8 hours once per week. 30 minutes of exercise daily creates more compound fitness than 3-hour workouts twice per week. Compound effects reward systematic consistency, not sporadic intensity. The sixth principle is compound measurement, tracking leading indicators that predict long-term compound effects rather than lagging indicators that only measure what has already happened. Most people measure compound systems incorrectly, focusing on outcomes rather than inputs. But compound effects are built through consistent inputs over time, so measuring inputs is more valuable than measuring outputs. For compound learning systems, measure pages read, courses completed, or hours spent in deliberate practice, rather than just measuring knowledge tests or skill demonstrations. For compound fitness systems, measure workouts completed, consistency percentages, and progressive overload, rather than just measuring weight or appearance changes. For compound wealth systems, measure savings rates, investment contributions, and learning activities, rather than just measuring net worth. Compound measurement also involves understanding leading versus lagging indicators over different timeframes. Daily actions are leading indicators for weekly results. Weekly results are leading indicators for monthly results. Monthly results are leading indicators for yearly results. This hierarchy helps you understand which metrics to focus on for different planning horizons. The ultimate goal of understanding compound effects is to create what I call compound life design, a systematic approach to living where every major area of your life is governed by systems that create exponential improvements over time. This means your health system compounds your physical capabilities. Your learning system compounds your knowledge and skills. Your relationship system compounds your social capital, and your financial system compounds your economic resources. When you achieve compound life design, extraordinary results become inevitable. You're not trying to force dramatic changes through willpower and motivation. You're leveraging the mathematical certainty of compound effects to create exponential improvements across every area of your life. This is why people who master systems thinking seem to achieve impossible results with apparent ease. They understand that compound effects make the impossible inevitable, but only for those who think systematically and act consistently over time. Chapter 11. Troubleshooting. Systems. What to do when everything falls apart. Even the best systems will face disruption. Life will throw curveballs, illness, travel, work stress, family emergencies, or simply losing motivation. The difference between people who maintain long-term success and those who constantly restart is not the absence of disruption, but their response to it. This chapter gives you the exact protocols for getting back on track when your systems break down, ensuring that temporary setbacks don't become permanent failures. The first principle of system troubleshooting is understanding the difference between system breakdown and system pause. System breakdown is when you abandon your systematic behaviors completely and revert to old patterns. System pause is when you temporarily reduce or modify your systems while maintaining some version of them. Most people treat every disruption as system breakdown, but successful people use system pause to navigate challenges while preserving their progress. System pause protocols start with minimum viable systems. Stripped-down versions of your regular systems that require minimal time, energy, or resources, but maintain the behavioral pattern. If your regular exercise system involves an hour at the gym, your minimum viable system might be 10 minutes of bodyweight exercises anywhere. If your reading system involves 30 minutes of focused study, your minimum viable system might be reading 1 page before bed. The key to effective minimum viable systems is identity preservation rather than outcome achievement. You're not trying to get the same results during disrupted periods. You're trying to maintain evidence that you are still someone who exercises, reads, meditates, or whatever your system involves. This prevents identity erosion, which is the real danger during challenging periods. Recovery protocols are equally important as prevention protocols. When you inevitably miss days or abandon your systems temporarily, you need predetermined responses that prevent small failures from becoming large ones. The most critical recovery protocol is the 24-hour rule. If you break your system, you must re-engage within 24 hours. Not next week, not next Monday, not after things calm down. Within 24 hours. The 24-hour rule works because it prevents the psychological momentum of failure from building. Missing one day creates a small crack in your identity. Missing 2 days in a row creates doubt. Missing a week creates the story that you're someone who doesn't stick to things. But re-engaging within 24 hours reinforces the story that you're someone who gets back on track quickly when life happens. Another crucial troubleshooting protocol is failure analysis. Systematically identifying why your systems broke down so you can strengthen them against future disruption. Most people just try harder after failures, but system thinkers analyze and adapt. Was the system too complex for your current life situation? Did environmental changes make execution more difficult? Were you trying to maintain too many systems simultaneously? Did external stressors overwhelm your capacity? Environmental system failures are the most common and easiest to fix. Your gym closes, you travel to a location without your normal resources, your schedule changes dramatically. The solution is environmental adaptation protocols. Predetermined modifications to your systems based on common environmental changes. Business travelers who maintain fitness systems have hotel room workout routines. People with unpredictable schedules have time-flexible versions of their learning systems. Capacity overload failures happen when you're trying to maintain more systems than your current mental, physical, or emotional resources can handle. The solution isn't trying harder. It's strategic reduction. Identify which systems provide the highest leverage for your current goals and temporarily reduce or pause others. System thinking means being strategic about your capacity allocation, not trying to do everything perfectly all the time. Motivation-based failures are actually the easiest to solve. Because they don't require system changes, they require mindset changes. When you don't feel motivated to maintain your systems, the problem isn't your systems, it's your relationship with motivation. Systems are designed to work without motivation. If you're dependent on feeling motivated to execute your systems, they're not truly systematic yet. The most powerful troubleshooting strategy is what I call systematic self-compassion. Treating system failures as data rather than moral failures. When your systems break down, your first response should be curiosity, not self-criticism. What can this failure teach me about system design? How can I modify my approach to be more robust? What did I learn about my capacity limits or environmental needs? Self-compassion in system troubleshooting also means understanding that perfect consistency is not the goal. Systematic consistency is the goal. Perfect consistency means never missing a day, which is unrealistic and creates fragility. Systematic consistency means maintaining your systems most of the time and recovering quickly when you don't. This creates anti-fragility, systems that actually become stronger through occasional stress and recovery. Advanced troubleshooting involves stress testing your systems before you need them. Deliberately practice your minimum viable systems and recovery protocols during good times, so they're automatic during difficult times. If you know you have a stressful period coming up, proactively shift to your minimum viable systems rather than waiting for breakdown to force the change. The goal of system troubleshooting is not to prevent all failures. It's to make failures temporary and educational rather than permanent and defeating. When you master troubleshooting, you develop what I call system confidence, the deep knowledge that no matter what happens in your life, you can maintain the core behaviors that create long-term success. This confidence makes you anti-fragile in a world of constant change. Chapter 12. Advanced System Architecture. Building multi-domain life systems. Once you've mastered individual systems, you're ready for advanced system architecture, designing integrated life systems that create exponential results across multiple domains simultaneously. This is where the most successful people separate themselves from those who just have good habits. They don't manage isolated behaviors. They orchestrate comprehensive life systems that make excellence inevitable across every area that matters. Advanced system architecture starts with understanding domain interconnection, how success in one area of life naturally supports or undermines success in other areas. Physical health affects mental performance. Mental performance affects career success. Career success affects financial freedom. Financial freedom affects relationship quality. Relationship quality affects mental health. Everything is connected, and your systems should reflect these connections. The first principle of multi-domain architecture is leverage identification, finding systematic behaviors that create benefits across multiple life domains simultaneously. These high-leverage behaviors become the foundation of your system architecture because they provide exponential returns on your time and energy investment. A morning exercise routine doesn't just improve physical health. It also increases mental clarity, discipline, energy levels, and stress management. Reading systems provide another example of multi-domain leverage. Regular reading improves knowledge, communication skills, critical thinking, cultural awareness, and provides stress relief and entertainment. A well-designed reading system creates compound benefits across intellectual, professional, and personal domains. This is why successful people are disproportionately readers, not because reading is magic, but because it's high-leverage systematic behavior. The second principle is temporal optimization, designing your daily and weekly rhythms to maximize system execution across multiple domains. This involves understanding your personal energy patterns, attention cycles, and environmental constraints to create systematic time allocation that serves all your important goals. Most people let their time be determined by reactive responses to immediate demands. But system architects proactively design their temporal environment. Advanced temporal optimization involves what I call energy-activity matching, aligning high-energy systematic behaviors with your peak energy periods and low-energy behaviors with your lower energy periods. If you're most mentally sharp in the morning, that's when you execute systems requiring deep focus or learning. If your energy dips in the afternoon, that's when you execute more routine systematic behaviors like organization or planning. The third principle is system hierarchy. Understanding that not all systems are equally important and designing your architecture to prioritize high-impact systems over lower-impact ones. When life gets complicated and you can't maintain everything perfectly, you need clear priorities about which systems to protect and which systems to pause. This prevents the all-or-nothing thinking that destroys progress during challenging periods. System hierarchy also involves understanding dependencies. Which systems support other systems, and which systems can operate independently. Your sleep system supports every other system you have, making it a foundational priority. Your organization system supports your productivity system. Your learning system supports your career system. Understanding these dependencies helps you maintain the core systems that enable everything else. The fourth principle is systematic integration, designing explicit connections between your different systems so they reinforce each other rather than competing for time and attention. Integration might involve shared resources, shared timing, shared environments, or shared rewards. The goal is creating synergistic effects where the combination of systems produces better results than isolated systems would. One powerful integration strategy is system stacking across domains, pence, linking behaviors from different life areas into unified routines. Your morning routine might integrate physical health through exercise, mental health through meditation, intellectual growth through reading, and productivity through planning. Each behavior naturally leads to the next, and together they create comprehensive morning momentum across multiple life domains. Another integration strategy is reward system alignment, designing your reward structures so that maintaining one system naturally supports maintaining others. If you reward consistent exercise with high-quality workout gear, you're reinforcing both your fitness system and your personal standards system. If you reward consistent learning with attendance at conferences or events, you're reinforcing both your growth system and your network building system. The fifth principle is adaptive architecture, designing your multi-domain systems to evolve as your life circumstances, priorities, and capabilities change. Static system architecture becomes obsolete as you grow and as your external environment shifts. Adaptive architecture involves regular system reviews, deliberate experimentation with new approaches, and willingness to modify successful systems when they no longer serve your highest priorities. Adaptive architecture also involves anticipatory system design, building flexibility into your systems so they can handle predictable life changes without complete overhaul. If you know your career will involve travel, Your exercise and nutrition systems should be designed to work in multiple environments. If you're planning to start a family, your learning and productivity systems should be designed to work with less time and more interruptions. The sixth principle is systematic measurement across domains, tracking leading indicators that help you understand how your different systems are performing individually and how they're interacting with each other. This goes beyond measuring individual habit compliance to understanding system-level effectiveness and domain-level progress. Advanced measurement involves understanding lag relationships between different domains, how improvements in one area affect other areas over different time periods. Fitness improvements might affect energy levels within weeks but affect confidence and attractiveness over months. Learning improvements might affect job performance over months but affect career opportunities over years. Understanding these relationships helps you maintain long-term perspective during periods when progress feels slow. The goal of advanced system architecture is creating what I call integrated life excellence, a situation where your systematic behaviors across all important life domains reinforce each other to create exponential results. When you achieve this level of system sophistication, extraordinary results across multiple areas of life become inevitable. Not because you're working harder, but because you're working systematically across everything that matters. Chapter 13. The Psychology of Long-Term Consistency. Never going backwards. The ability to maintain systems over years and decades, not just weeks and months, separates temporary improvers from permanent transformers. Long-term consistency requires understanding the psychological forces that either support or undermine systematic behavior over extended periods. This chapter reveals the mental models and strategies that ensure your systems become stronger over time rather than gradually degrading. The first psychological principle of long-term consistency is identity momentum. The recognition that each systematic behavior either reinforces or weakens your desired identity. Over long periods, these identity votes accumulate into powerful self-concept shifts that make certain behaviors feel natural and automatic. But identity momentum works in both directions. Consistent, systematic behavior creates positive identity momentum, while inconsistent behavior creates negative identity momentum. Understanding identity momentum means recognizing that you're never maintaining a neutral position. You're either becoming more of the person you want to be or less of that person. There is no standing still. This recognition creates urgency around consistency without creating pressure around perfection. You don't need to execute your systems perfectly, but you do need to execute them consistently enough to maintain positive identity momentum. The second principle is adaptation prevention. Understanding how to maintain system effectiveness. As your brain adapts to systematic behaviors, just like your body adapts to exercise routines and requires progressive overload to continue improving, your brain adapts to behavioral patterns and may require variation to maintain engagement. But adaptation prevention in systems is different from adaptation prevention in training. You want to maintain the core behavior while varying the implementation details. Adaptation prevention strategies include systematic novelty introduction, regularly adding small variations to your systematic behaviors to maintain mental engagement without changing the core system. If your reading system becomes routine, you might vary the genres, formats, or environments while maintaining the daily reading behavior. If your exercise system becomes automatic, you might vary the activities or locations while maintaining the daily movement behavior. The third principle is compound motivation. Understanding that long-term consistency creates psychological rewards that become stronger over time rather than weaker. Most people assume motivation decreases over time as novelty wears off. But systematic behavior creates its own motivation through identity reinforcement, progress compounding, and habit satisfaction. The key is designing systems that become more rewarding over time, not less rewarding. Compound motivation works through several mechanisms. Competence motivation increases as you become better at your systematic behaviors and see increasing returns from your efforts. Autonomy motivation increases as your systems become more automatic and require less conscious effort. Purpose motivation increases as you see long-term results and understand how your systems connect to your deeper values and goals. The fourth principle is consistency flexibility. The seemingly contradictory idea that long-term consistency requires short-term flexibility. Rigid adherence to specific implementations often leads to system breakdown when life circumstances change. But flexible adherence to core principles allows systems to survive and adapt to changing conditions. The goal is consistency in the behavior, not consistency in the exact method of executing the behavior. Consistency flexibility involves distinguishing between system essentials and system preferences. The essential element of an exercise system is regular movement. The preference elements are specific exercises, times, locations, or durations. When circumstances make your preferences impossible, you maintain the essentials through alternative implementations. This prevents all or nothing thinking that destroys long-term consistency. The fifth principle is systematic self-renewal. Regularly refreshing your motivation for maintaining your systems by reconnecting with the reasons you started and the progress you've made. Long-term consistency can become unconscious, which is usually good, but sometimes you need conscious appreciation of what your systems have created in your life to maintain enthusiasm and prevent complacency. Self-renewal practices include progress reviews, where you systematically document how your life has improved due to your systematic behaviors. How is your health different? How is your knowledge base different? How are your relationships different? How is your financial situation different? These reviews remind you that your systems are working even when daily progress feels invisible. Another self-renewal practice is vision updating. Regularly connecting your current systems to your evolving long-term vision. As you grow and change, your goals and priorities may shift, and your systems should evolve to serve your current vision rather than outdated objectives. This prevents the psychological disconnection that occurs when you're maintaining systems that no longer feel personally relevant. The sixth principle is community systems. Surrounding yourself with people who support long-term systematic thinking rather than short-term motivation-based approaches. Your social environment has enormous influence on your ability to maintain consistent behavior over years. And most people underestimate how much their relationships either support or undermine their systematic progress. Community systems involve both addition and curation. Addition means actively seeking out people who demonstrate long-term consistency in areas you care about and learning from their approaches. Curation means spending less time with people who consistently demonstrate short-term thinking excuse-making, or motivation dependence. This isn't about cutting off relationships, but about being intentional regarding whose approaches to success influence your thinking. The seventh principle is systematic legacy thinking. Understanding that your systems create compound effects that extend far beyond your individual life. Long-term consistency models systematic thinking for family members, colleagues, and friends. It demonstrates that sustainable change is possible through systematic approaches rather than dramatic efforts. This legacy perspective provides additional motivation for maintaining systems even when individual benefits feel less urgent. Legacy thinking also involves understanding that your systematic behaviors are investments in your future self's capabilities and options. The knowledge, skills, health, relationships, and assets you build through systematic behavior create exponential opportunities for your older self. This long-term perspective helps maintain motivation during periods when immediate rewards feel insufficient. The ultimate goal of mastering long-term consistency psychology is creating what I call systematic inevitability, a mental state where maintaining your systems feels as natural and automatic as maintaining basic hygiene. When you achieve this level of psychological integration, extraordinary long-term results become inevitable because you've eliminated the mental friction that typically derails progress over extended periods. Chapter 14. Systems for High Performers. How the top 1% stay ahead. The most successful people in every field have one thing in common. They've moved beyond basic systems to what I call performance systems. These aren't just habits for maintaining baseline functionality. These are sophisticated, systematic approaches designed to create and sustain exceptional performance over time. Understanding how high performers design and execute their systems reveals principles you can apply regardless of your current level. The first principle of high-performance systems is leverage obsession, constantly seeking systematic behaviors that create disproportionate returns on time and energy investment. High performers don't just work systematically. They work systematically on the highest leverage activities available. They understand that not all systematic behaviors are created equal, and they design their systems around activities that create exponential rather than linear returns. Leverage obsession involves continuous evaluation of systematic behaviors based on return on investment. High performers regularly ask themselves whether their current systems are the highest and best use of their systematic capacity. Are there more leveraged behaviors they could systematize? Are there lower value systematic behaviors they could eliminate or delegate? This optimization mindset ensures their systems evolve toward maximum effectiveness over time. High performers also understand meta-leverage, systematizing the process of identifying and implementing high-leverage behaviors. Instead of just doing valuable activities systematically, they systematize the process of discovering what activities are most valuable. This might involve regular strategic reviews, systematic experimentation with new approaches, or systematic learning from other high performers in their field. The second principle is systematic intelligence gathering, designing systems around continuously upgrading their knowledge, skills, and strategic awareness. High performers understand that in rapidly changing environments, learning systems are not optional. They're essential for maintaining competitive advantage. But their learning systems are more sophisticated than casual reading or random skill development. High-performance learning systems involve systematic environmental scanning, regularly monitoring trends, innovations, and changes in their field that could affect their strategic position. This might involve systematic consumption of industry publications, regular networking with leading-edge practitioners, or systematic analysis of competitive developments. The goal is ensuring they see opportunities and threats before their competitors do. They also systematize skill development around their leverage points, the specific capabilities that create the most value in their field. Instead of random skill acquisition, they identify the few capabilities that create exponential value differences and systematically develop those capabilities to world-class levels. This focused approach creates sustainable competitive advantages that are difficult for competitors to replicate. The third principle is systematic relationship building. Designing systems around creating and maintaining the high-value relationships that accelerate success. High performers understand that extraordinary results rarely come from individual effort alone. They come from systematic collaboration with other exceptional people. Their relationship systems are designed to consistently provide value to others while systematically building their network of high-value connections. High-performance relationship systems involve systematic value creation, regularly providing value to their network without expecting immediate returns. This might involve sharing insights, making introductions, providing feedback, or creating opportunities for others. The systematic nature of this value creation ensures they maintain top-of-mind awareness with their network and build deep relationship capital over time. They also systematize network expansion, deliberately connecting with people who can accelerate their goals and to whom they can provide value. This isn't networking for networking's sake. It's systematic relationship building with specific strategic intent. High performers understand which relationships would be most valuable for their objectives and systematically work to build those relationships. The fourth principle is systematic recovery and renewal. Designing systems around maintaining peak performance capacity over extended periods. High performers understand that sustainable excellence requires systematic investment in their physical, mental, and emotional resources. They don't just work systematically. They systematically optimize their capacity to work at high levels. High-performance recovery systems involve systematic stress management, systematic physical maintenance, and systematic mental renewal. These aren't afterthoughts or rewards for hard work. They're strategic investments in maintaining the capacity for high performance. High performers understand that recovery isn't the opposite of performance. It's what enables sustained high performance. They also systematize environment optimization, continuously improving the physical, digital, and social environments that support their high-performance behaviors. This might involve systematic workspace optimization, systematic technology configuration, or systematic lifestyle design. The goal is eliminating friction and distraction from their environment while maximizing support for their highest value activities. The fifth principle is systematic innovation and experimentation. Designing systems around continuously improving their approaches and discovering better methods. High performers don't just maintain successful systems, they systematically evolve them. They understand that what got them to their current level may not get them to the next level, and they systematically explore more effective approaches. High-performance innovation systems involve systematic experimentation with new methods, systematic analysis of results, and systematic implementation of improvements. This creates continuous optimization loops that ensure their systems become more effective over time rather than stagnating. High performers treat their personal systems like products that require continuous development and improvement. They also systematize external learning, regularly studying how other high performers in their field and adjacent fields structure their systematic approaches. This cross-pollination of system ideas accelerates their own system development and helps them avoid reinventing approaches that others have already optimized. The sixth principle is systematic measurement and optimization, designing sophisticated feedback systems that provide actionable information about performance trends and system effectiveness. High performers don't just track basic metrics, they systematically measure leading indicators that predict future performance and system metrics that reveal optimization opportunities. High-performance measurement systems involve both quantitative and qualitative tracking. They measure objective outcomes and subjective experiences, short-term results and long-term trends, individual metrics and system-level patterns. This comprehensive measurement approach provides the information necessary for continuous system optimization. The ultimate goal of high-performance systems is creating what I call systematic excellence, a situation where exceptional performance becomes the natural result of systematic behavior rather than heroic effort. When you master high-performance system design, extraordinary results become inevitable, because you're systematically executing at levels that guarantee exceptional outcomes over time. Chapter 15. Your System-Driven Future. Living Beyond Goals. Forever. You now have the complete blueprint for transforming your life through systematic thinking. But implementing these concepts is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when systematic thinking becomes your default approach to every area of life. When you reach this level, you'll never need to depend on goals, motivation, or willpower again. You'll have created a system-driven life that produces extraordinary results automatically. This final chapter is about making the transition from someone who has systems to someone who thinks systematically about everything. It's the difference between using these tools temporarily and adopting them as a permanent operating system for your life. When you complete this transition, you join the small percentage of people who seem to achieve everything they want with apparent ease. The first element of complete systematic transformation is systematic thinking across all life domains. Instead of having a few good habits, you approach every important area of your life with systematic intention. Your health, relationships, career, finances, learning, contribution to others. Everything becomes governed by well-designed systems rather than random actions or sporadic motivation. This doesn't mean obsessive control over every detail of your life. It means intentional design of the systematic behaviors that create the outcomes you want in every area that matters to you. You become someone who instinctively asks systematic questions. Instead of setting goals, you ask what systems would naturally produce your desired outcomes. Instead of relying on motivation, you ask how to design environments and processes that make desired behaviors automatic. The second element is systematic problem solving. When challenges arise, instead of hoping things will improve or trying to force solutions through effort, you systematically analyze the situation and design systematic responses. You become someone who solves problems permanently by changing systems rather than temporarily by working harder. Systematic problem solving involves understanding root causes rather than surface symptoms. If you're consistently behind on important projects, instead of just working longer hours, you systematically analyze your time allocation, priority setting, and attention management to design systems that prevent the problem from recurring. If you're struggling with relationship quality, Instead of just trying to be a better person, you systematically analyze your communication patterns, time investment, and value creation to design better relationship systems. The third element is systematic growth and adaptation. You become someone who continuously evolves your systems as you grow and as circumstances change. You understand that the systems that got you to your current level may not get you to the next level. And you systematically upgrade your approaches as you develop new capabilities and face new challenges. Systematic adaptation involves regular system reviews where you evaluate what's working, what's not working, and what needs to change. You become comfortable with modifying successful systems when they no longer serve your highest priorities. You understand that systematic thinking is a dynamic process, not a fixed destination. The fourth element is systematic influence and contribution. As you master systematic thinking in your own life, you begin to influence others towards systematic approaches. You become someone who models long-term thinking and systematic execution in your family, workplace, and community. You demonstrate through your results that systematic approaches work better than motivation-based approaches. Systematic influence doesn't mean preaching or imposing your methods on others. It means living in a way that demonstrates the effectiveness of systematic thinking and being available to help when others express genuine interest in your approaches. You become a resource for people who want to move beyond the cycle of motivation and failure that characterizes most people's approach to change. The fifth element is systematic legacy creation. You begin thinking in terms of the systematic behaviors that will create value far beyond your individual lifetime. What knowledge will you systematically develop and share? What relationships will you systematically build and maintain? What assets will you systematically create for future generations? What example will your systematic approach provide for people who observe your life? Legacy thinking doesn't require dramatic achievements. It requires systematic consistency in behaviors that compound over decades. The person who reads systematically for 40 years creates a legacy of knowledge and wisdom. The person who builds relationships systematically for decades creates a legacy of connection and influence. The person who invests systematically for decades creates a legacy of financial freedom. The ultimate transformation is psychological. You become someone who genuinely prefers systematic approaches to motivation-based approaches. You no longer see systems as constraints on spontaneity or creativity. You see them as foundations for freedom and effectiveness. You understand that systematic thinking doesn't limit your possibilities. It makes extraordinary possibilities inevitable. When you reach this level, you'll notice that most people are still trapped in the goal, motivation, failure cycle that you've left behind. You'll see people getting excited about dramatic changes they want to make, relying on willpower to sustain those changes, experiencing inevitable setbacks, and then starting the cycle over again. You'll understand why their approach doesn't work, and you'll have compassion for their struggle because you remember being trapped in the same patterns. But you'll also understand that you've discovered something profound, a way of approaching life that makes extraordinary results inevitable rather than hopeful. You'll know that whatever you decide is important, you can systematically create it. Whatever challenges you face, you can systematically solve them. Whatever level you want to reach, you can systematically build the behaviors that will get you there. This is your system-driven future. It's not a fantasy or a goal. It's the inevitable result of applying the principles you've learned consistently over time. The only question is whether you'll begin implementing these systems today or continue hoping that motivation and willpower will eventually work. The choice is yours, but now you know there's a better way. Now you know how to set systems instead of goals and create the life you've always wanted through systematic thinking and systematic action. Your transformation starts with your next systematic behavior. Choose one system, implement it using the 30-day protocol, and begin the journey toward becoming someone who achieves extraordinary results, not through heroic effort, but through systematic excellence. Your future self will thank you for making this choice, and your results will prove that systematic thinking is the secret that separates dreamers from achievers in every area of life.